I, 27 female, can hear my neighbor, F, crying. Hey Reddit, I have a weird one. I, 27 female, had COVID recently, so I was home quarantining for a week. During that time, I started to hear my neighbor, F, crying. I know very little about my neighbor. I know she is from Eastern Europe and I think she lives alone. We have not had much interaction during the last 3+ years that I have lived here other than the occasional, hello, and delivering misdelivered mail. After COVID, I am working from home and the crying has not stopped. And it's not just crying, it is bawling. It is gasping for breath, loud crying. It just sounds devastating. I want to be clear that I am not complaining. I know it is not my place to do anything. I don't know this woman at all and I know I cannot fix whatever is hurting her. But does anyone have any advice on something nice I could do for her? I was thinking of maybe sending her flowers. But I also really do not want to be a creep. Any and all advice is appreciated. I also don't want her to know that I can hear her crying because that just seems like a violation. Maybe this is all misguided and I just need to keep turning music on when I hear her cry. Too long did not read. I can hear my neighbor crying and while I know I can't fix whatever it is that is hurting her, I would love to do something nice for her. I know growing up my parents taught me to bring baked goods to people in distress or that I wanted to befriend. Knocking on her door, maybe claiming you bought an extra box of cookies by mistake and offering them to her, something in completely sealed packaging because you don't know each other, might be nice, and then sparking a conversation, offering your number and saying you want to be friends. 2 years ago I was going through a really hard time, depression, bankrupt, health issues, unemployment. My neighbor stopped by with some random extra food he didn't need. This simple act of kindness was a turning point in my life. I was close to suicide but it was like the lights turned back on and just maybe I would be okay. If I were you I would knock on her door with some cookies or something and say you had extra if she wants them. Maybe ask her over for tea. Now that I'm in a better place I often help out the neighbor that helped me. He is a senior on a fixed income but I will drop off a case of beer or a few joints or some food and it makes his day. Wow. You sound like a very thoughtful person. I think flowers would be a lovely gesture. However, without letting her know that you can tell she has been sad, the context will come across as very perplexing. IMO. Maybe you could come up with a random act of kindness, and leave a note indicating that you are paying it forward. Poor woman. Maybe she has relatives in Ukraine. Sad face. I have been in your position before in multiple apartments I've lived in. Relationship troubles, from what I couldn't help but overhear. It hurt my heart hearing all that pain. I just wanted to say that you are very sweet, Op. Why not ask her over for coffee? Or if you aren't comfortable with that, is there a place nearby? I mean, it's not that weird. I was out for a walk in the park yesterday and a random woman I just met mentioned walking over to the store nearby to grab a drink. I wouldn't mention the crying, it's kind of intrusive. If she is lonely or upset and wants to confide in you, she will. I was once the crying apartment neighbor. Was going through a very rough time. My sweet neighbor whom I didn't know well brought me some homemade lasagna. I really appreciated the gesture so much. It took my mind off of things for a moment and I was in need of home-cooked food since it's hard to cook when you're so busy sobbing lol. I appreciated that she didn't pry or linger but that the food was so clutch. It also brought to my attention that the whole building could hear me, so I did quiet my cries, tears of joy. She's from Europe. In most European countries it is common to knock on the neighbor's door and ask if they're okay. Especially if they live alone. I mean, you said she's not just crying but bawling. Maybe she needs someone to talk to. Why don't knock on her door, say hey, I know you're not okay. Is there anything I can do? I'm just trying to help. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I don't know then. Could be anything. Maybe she lost someone dear to her. I wouldn't do anything like flowers or so because that could indicate you can hear her and you wanted to do something. She might be embarrassed. If I have an opportunity to bump into her, I try to say a bit more than hi, introduce myself, start a convo. But if that opportunity never happens, you can always organize a situation where you're doing something in your app, tell you'd like her opinion, could be something you wrote, creating, painting, decorating. If none of this can happen, then maybe a little card gift could be something, like for Easter or whatever events coming soon. A happy national, something, day. Maybe you could make her some cookies and leave a nice note. That is so sad. Poor woman. You should invite her over for tea or dinner, etc. That way you don't need to confront her about the crying, you can just say you would like to get to know your neighbors a little better. Cookies and flowers are also nice, but but nothing can beat an actual meeting with another person when you are in distress. Maybe she won't say yes to tea, dinner, but at least she knows there's a person next door who is thinking about her, and that she can approach if she feels like it. I think random flowers from a neighbor would be weird. But if you wanted to give her some baked goods, that might come across as neighborly kindness. It probably depends on where you live. I'd still be surprised and confused if a neighbor I didn't know well brought me some muffins or whatever, but at least I have a mental model of that being a thing that can happen. Mostly though, I think there isn't much you can do since you're just at the casual say hi level of knowing each other. As someone who has once been the bawling neighbor, I can say that she is probably going through a really lonely, rough patch, and any small gesture of kindness can go a long way. I remember my crying. It was like intense wailing to release the emotional pain that was stabbing me in the chest. It's crazy how the smallest interaction can really make someone's day 100x better. In my case, my neighbor knocked on my door, asked if I was okay, and invited me over for a snack and to talk. He also would once in a while order some dinner and have it delivered to my door with a note. And it made me feel seen and heard for the first time. I appreciated it so much. You say she's from Eastern Europe, so she may very well have a lot to cry about these days. Maybe she lost family. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Either way, I would feel exactly as you do, confused and wanting to help in some way but not knowing how. Maybe the easiest way is to just knock on her door while she's bawling and ask her if there is anything you can do, that you worry a little. Or leave a kind note in the same spirit if she doesn't open. I probably wouldn't because I don't need neighbors to see my bawling face. Keep in mind though that there is a chance she might actually want to talk, and then you have to be prepared to listen at least for a while. I hope all goes well. I cry a lot and I'm sure my neighbors hear it, and if they brought me flowers or left them on my doorstep my week would be made. Honestly, if whatever she has going on is serious enough that she's crying about it for days and days on end, it's too serious for anything you can do as a random neighbor to make a significant impact. Having said that, if I were in your shoes, I would probably still feel a bit guilty if I did literally nothing. So if you wanted to bake some cookies or something like that as a gesture to assuage your conscience, I don't think there would be any harm in it. Hey, you're a sweetheart. Little acts of kindness can save lives. It's possible she is emotionally tied to Ukraine or the area. I know I've been crying a lot every damn day reading about the horrors Russia is inflicting upon them. Bake something and share it with her. That is a neighborly, unintrusive yet caring thing to do. Like other commenters have said, she might have ties to Ukraine. I'm sure she would appreciate a nice gesture like flowers or cookies. I'm Ukrainian too, and I've appreciated every little gesture I've gotten from people around me, even from acquaintances I barely know. If it was me, I wouldn't think it's creepy of you at all. That's very sad, poor woman. I'm wondering if she's from Ukraine if the crying is so emotional. My best pal is from Ukraine. We're in Australia, and she is just beside herself every day. I think the extra food delivery is a great idea. Make some food and offer her some. If she asks why, just tell her you made too much or that you're learning to cook and that you may have extra in the future as well. If she's grieving for whatever reason, not having to cook is a kind gesture and a huge weight off their shoulder. Really refreshing to see such a wholesome post on this thread. Another idea: flower seeds. If you don't feel comfortable talking to her. In Flemish we have a flower called vergeet me niet, which you could translate to English as little don't forget about me. My son's teacher used to give it to all the children of her class during first lockdown. Bake her a cake, a pie, ask her round for a drink. You don't need to mention anything about the crying. Tell her you thought it might be nice to get to know your neighbors. You're obviously a nice person as you took the time to post. I love being there for people. Whether it's to vent their feelings, ask for advice, make them laugh, whatever. Give it a try. Sounds like someone is going through a bad time and might appreciate some humanity. Folded hands, light skin tone, red heart, hands clapping. You can always knock on the door with a cake or flowers and ask if she wants to chat. If you are not sure if you will have anything to talk about, you could suggest watching a film. It'll be a lovely thing to do. It's horrible to hear that, and she will appreciate your concern. Knock on her door and ask her if everything is okay. Sounds like grief. Most grieving people don't want a solution to stop the grief because they're usually ISNT1. But the one thing that can help is letting them know that somebody cares about them and they can talk to you if they need. But make sure you actually care before they emotionally dump stuff on you. That one gesture of just letting them know you care could be all the difference. You're not invading her privacy. Shush is crying loudly and has to know she can be heard. You have the right to ask your neighbor if they are in pain. I've been her. I moved to London completely alone and cried on and off heavily for the first 2 months. No one said or did a thing, but if they had I probably would have cried. But not out of sadness, at the kindness. Go make a friend. Simply tell her you can hear, kinda awkward but not that big a deal, and ask if she wants someone to talk to. Isolation is tough, any break from it is usually welcome. Maybe take a cup of tea for both of you. My guess is you'll end up listening to her talk about a failed or lost relationship. Honestly, going simple is always good. Go knock on her door, ask her if she's okay and if she'd like to go for food, drinks, coffee, whatever floats her boat. Be honest that you've heard her distress and that you wish to offer a form of help, support. No need to hide it. It's okay to be in a bad spot. Dropping off cookies is a nice idea. You could also go over, knock on the door and say you are baking and ran out of eggs and need one more. It makes most people feel good to be helpful. The cookies could then be a thank you for the egg. Then if she ever needs something from you, she might be less hesitant to ask since you opened the door to that. I know it is not my place to do anything. Such a city way of life, in a town we care for our neighbors. Just ring that door already and ask if she is okay and if you can help. Edit, and introduce yourself ASAP and tell her welcome in the neighborhood. Edit 2, is she from Ukraine? My superintendent is lovely and knows everyone in the building and most very well, especially the ones who have lived there a long time. If your superintendent is like that too, I would probably start there and subtly mention the neighbor and see if the superintendent knows anything or would be willing to check up on him in some way. I'm in your neighbor situation and I would love if someone knocked to my door, maybe try lend some salt or sugar and in favor ask me if I come over for a tea so it would distract me from pain I'm going through. If that happens to me, I'd knock on door immediate and say let me help. How about a houseplant or baked goods? You don't have to tell her you have heard her crying, just knock and say, hey, we are neighbors but we don't really know each other. Let me know if you want to have coffee sometime. And give her your phone number if you are comfortable with that. That way she doesn't have to take you up on it right away but can reach out if she feels like it. Thank you for caring. Best you could do is lend a non-judgmental ear and not try to fix what the problem she has, but support her. Make her a warm meal and offer your time. People need connectivity the most. Just go say something to her. If you want to bring flowers, do that. If you want to bring food, do that. Plate of cookies with a smiley face post-it note. On her doorstep. No name, no explanation. Perhaps it has something to do with what's happening in Ukraine. You mentioned she's from Eastern Europe. I like the extra box of cookies idea. I think it's a lovely idea to make a kind gesture towards her. That sounds like she could be grieving or going through something equally devastating. I think flowers, baking her something, or something like that could be really nice. Also maybe leaving a note, say please reach out if you'd like to get coffee or would like to chat, and leave your number and apt hash. Worst that happens is she doesn't reach back. I think if you get a chance, it's always better to try to spread kindness less than 3. Is she affected by the war going on? Maybe. You could leave a flower at her door. You can bring her gifts or food, but don't go bankrupt. Every time I meet my long-distance girlfriend, write her a heartfelt letter. Say basically what you have said here. Poor thing. She must be in such distress and feel so alone. Tell her you're happy to chat to her if she wants. Maybe give her a box of chocolates, or if you bake, make her something. Offer her a hand of basic friendship and human kindness. Do you know what is happening in Eastern Europe? RN?